Broadcasting live from our studio in Boston, Solutions Review is proud to showcase Scale Computing in the Solution Spotlight, a unique online event for industry professionals.
I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and welcome to the Solution Spotlight featuring Scale Computing and focused on a guide to VMware migration. There are several issues that need to be considered when moving from one VM provider to another: compatibility issues, downtime and data loss, security and compliance, performance optimization, and integration challenges. So today, we're bringing you this demonstration of Scale Computing and a presentation of how to ensure a successful outcome when considering an IT migration project. And joining us to walk you through this demonstration today is Mike O'Neill, Director of Solutions Architects for North America for Scale Computing. Mike, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Doug. It's a pleasure to be here, and good morning to you.
It's good that you're here because ultimately what we're going to get is not only someone who is representing Scale Computing, but it's my understanding that you used to be a client of Scale Computing before you joined the company. Can you give us a little bit of a walkthrough of your journey from client side to solution provider side?
Yeah, sure thing. I was lucky enough to start my journey, if you want to call it lucky enough, in the world of IT. But back about the 2011 timeframe, when actually the product formerly known as HC3 that we tout today at Scale Computing as Scale Computing Platform was really introduced. I was lucky enough to be at a trade show, and I met the founders at that trade show. One of them, of course, being Jeff Reedy, our CEO. And here most recently, as he's touted at that same show we recently were at, I was customer number 5. So I have been on the journey as a need to get into an alternative method of virtualizing and having expandability, having scalability to get the workloads running. Because my company at the time was based in distribution and was also an acquisition-based company. So we had to have the ability to quickly scale out, scale up, and be able to take things to that next level quickly without too much interruption to the end users and the day-to-day activities. So when I got introduced to Scale, it was a very intriguing opportunity. They're there at the when they were laying the groundwork for hyperconvergence, as it came to be known, thanks to Scale Computing here to where we are today. So it's a pleasure to be on this side of it now for over 6 years, in my experience on the partner side, if you will, the vendor side with Scale Computing, to bring the solution out to the teams that need it out in the field.
Yeah, and as I mentioned in my intro, and as I think we all understand, there's a lot of moving parts here with the idea of migrating, and not only just getting to the decision of deciding to want to migrate, finding the right solution to migrate to, and then working through a host of the challenges that you need to really come to grips with prior to the migration, and then all the way through the migration. So we're going to let you present that, probably somewhere along that path that I just outlined. Before that, though, if anybody has any questions, I want to let them know that I will take them all here, and we'll let Mike go through his presentation and present the demonstration of the Scale Computing solution. And then I will join back in, and we will have a nice Q&A at the end and get to any questions you have. I'll have a few myself, and we'll wrap things up from there. So Mike, I'm going to hand it over to you, give you the floor, and take it away, and I'll catch up with you on the other side.
Perfect. Thank you, Doug. And again, good morning to everybody, and thanks for taking your time out of your day to join us today. As the title of this presentation stands up here, Seamless Transition, our view to the migration of VMware, or from VMware, I should say, to hopefully Scale Computing, if not other parties. It's always a change, right? In the world of IT, the things we have to consider are change. For us, we have been around as that VMware alternative for over 10 years. And that speaks to the longevity and the capabilities of the products that we have brought to the table, specifically with the Scale Computing platform and all of the components that make up this platform. The idea of an alternative is very paramount in today's conversations with the Broadcom acquisition of VMware and the changes that have come down the pipe since that officially hit the road. And hitting the road is an interesting way to think of it, because a lot of people are talking about doing that from VMware. And that's just the nature of change in the world of IT. And when these acquisitions happen, it creates a bigger window of opportunity for not only people like myself here at the vendor level, but also the end users and those customers that are already using those products today to think about a change. So when you think about the change of moving to scale computing, we are a next gen platform built on hyperconvergence. And the whole idea of what we bring to the table today in this post Broadcom acquisition era with VMware is not just an alternative, but an upgrade. And the reason we consider it an upgrade are really for the pillars that you see here before you in those 4 categories of simplicity, efficiency, availability, and flexibility. It's simple from the standpoint that setup to configuration, there's no management, there's no maintenance. You can refresh, you can retire, you can do everything from that same pane of glass through the life cycle of the infrastructure with scale computing. We are efficient to the point where HyperCore, which is our software layer that's a part of the scale computing platform, is so efficient it can be deployed on very small pieces of hardware like the NUC platforms that are out there today. And we leverage the power of those NUC platforms to provide enterprise-grade performance and reliability into a right-sized computing environment for anything from the edge into the data center. The availability component is very important to us as well, because arguably that is the biggest piece of the puzzle of what we bring to the table with the scale computing platform, because high availability and fault tolerance is built into the product. Hardware failures, connectivity failures, those things happen. But how you manage and how you have to deal with those when they do happen is really the challenge in most people's environments today. And scale computing takes a lot of that onus on that methodology or that hands-on experience and really brings it to the forefront of our AI ops model with AIM, which is our autonomous infrastructure management engine that gives the system, HyperCore, and the platform itself the ability to heal, the ability to take those problems and make them go away and just keep everything running for the end users. And then at the end of the day, the flexibility that comes along with the types of applications, containerization, future applications within the field of what you might want to put on this platform are all going to be at your disposal, because the flexibility of the scale computing platform with those components that we'll talk about here in a little more in depth gives you a unified infrastructure that can run everything you can think of, the ones you have today and the ones that you're going to probably want to run as the future of this continues to change in this roadmap. Now, some of our customers and some of the reviews we have out there in the world are very publicly available. This slide just wants to demonstrate some of the names you may know or may not know that have become scale computing partners in this journey with us. Gartner, of course, is one of the bigger names out there from a standpoint of giving people the visibility and understanding of what products can come to the table with. And their peer review site is very good to look at. And we have some very high reviews on there as well. From the partnering perspective, channel partners out there are very important to us because we are a channel-led organization in terms of how we go to market. So that being the case, when you do contact your partners, those partners hold us in very high accord. As a matter of fact, as you can see here, the ARC Awards are something that's very important to us. And those ARC Awards have been very, very instrumental in guiding us to where we can make the product better and how we can make it a better product, not just for our partners, but of course, the end users and customers that become a piece of the scale computing story. So here, just for an example, we have been very lucky in the world of our partner reviews and the people that take a look at what we have to put out there to set some records in this world, because the CRN ARC Awards have been around for 40 years. And starting in 2022, we took it to another level and set some records, as you can see here, as indicated by this slide. And that was a very, very proud moment for our company, and especially for our CEO, Jeff Reedy. As I mentioned earlier, he goes out and makes sure we're taking care of the customers and listening to the feedback. He personally still attends these shows with us and gets the feedback from the customers and the end users to help push our product to the next generations and beyond. And as you can see here, just this past year as well, we set another record on the scoring factors for the ARC Awards and won every category against our competitors out there. And we're hoping to do the same thing here as 2024 comes to fruition for us as we push through this new world, again, with the VMware acquisition by Broadcom pushing us to this new heights. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to what we're putting out there as a product. Now, Scale Computing Platform is built on a software stack. That software stack has the ability to support legacy and modern applications, as I mentioned. Legacy meaning traditional virtual machines, x86-based, Unix, Linux, Windows operating systems, you name the methodology of getting something spun up on us. Because we are KVM-based under the covers, it's a very open source methodology, which gives us flexibility to bring things on board to our customized and, of course, patented software layers that are there within. And those layers consist of Hypercore, which is that software layer that contains the hypervisor, contains the storage, contains the virtualization layer for the servers, and our disaster recovery suite that adds the protection built in to the systems as well. And then to wrap it up with a pretty bow, on the outside, we have our Fleet Manager product that we have introduced here as a piece of the puzzle with Scale Computing's platform. And that is our management and orchestration layer to give you the ability not only just to handle a cluster or two locations, but beyond, and scaling that out to hundreds and thousands of sites with a single pane of glass and the first ever cloud managed hyperconvergence management portal out there. And we're very proud of that product. And we'll talk about that here in a minute as well. But at the end of the day, the facts are the facts. Scale has been a leading alternative, and as I mentioned, now an upgrade alternative to the VMware world. It is very easy to deploy our product. The deployment times take under an hour to get things stood up. And then you're able to start migrating and building workloads on top of it. I talked about the efficiencies that are brought to the table, and that's out of the door, a cost efficiency in your pocket as well, because of that low need for software and performance on top of our hardware. We have the ability to put the resources towards those workloads and give you the ability to get those up and running a lot quicker and a lot easier. But at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is what is the difference and what leads us to be that alternative. And a lot of that does fall to that cost factor. And along with that, as we push through this and I show you the demo, think of where you're coming from and where you think you might be going to, because right now you're probably getting a lot of quotes in the door from the VMware side of the world that have changed dramatically. And we've brought some of this to the table internally to give you the ability to really look at this alternative and upgrade path more seriously, very specifically because out of the gate, from a TCO perspective, we are a 70% reduction to those costs from what we've been provided as the studies that are out there on the old pricing. So imagine what it's going to be like as this new pricing levels out and what it ends up being on as we continue forward. Now, to help that transition for us, we have introduced some campaigns within our sales organization to help you move from VMware and migrate onto Scale a lot easier. A couple of those involve what we're calling a seamless switch, which is really a credit towards remaining terms on your VMware contracts. So you'll get credit on not just the term itself, but with your rip and replace campaign that we introduced, we can also look at taking trade-ins on the hardware components. If you've just refreshed infrastructure and your VMware is running out, you switch that and did it a little differently, we can actually help you upgrade that hardware if it is not already on our HCL. If it's on our HCL, we can go down some discussions to help see if it aligns and would actually just run as a software product on top of us. And then along with both of those promotions, we are, of course, giving the migration tools and options and paths for that migration included in the conversation. Because what that is giving us the ability to do is put you on a roadmap for the future. And not just for what the future of edge computing, as we love to tout it today, is, but really for the future of your new infrastructure model built on the Scale Computing platform now and beyond into the future. And we'll get a little more context around what that future kind of holds in our vision of what our CEO, Jeff Reedy, has brought to the table in that conversation here. But for right now, why don't we jump in and take a look at what it's going to look like to actually live and breathe on the Scale Computing platform. Now, to do that, we're going to kind of reverse engineer the conversation. I'm going to start from the Fleet Manager side of the world. Now, Fleet Manager is our cloud-based component that gives you the ability and visibility to see what's happening within your organization, whether that be a single cluster or whether it be multiple clusters across your organization from a health perspective. And then it also gives us the ability to dig in and do some cool stuff around deployment, around lifecycle management, and around simple day-to-day access and management as well, because we have some cool features that bring a VPN-less connectivity option through HTTPS technologies and integrating our Secure Link product for access to the VMs as well as the cluster UI itself that we'll see here in a second. Now, this screen here with Fleet Manager, it is just fleet.scalecomputing.com. You log in. We have the single sign-on capabilities built in to that to help alleviate any concerns on the security side of it. But from day one, you get the ability to see what's going on across the board. Now, a cluster to us, just for purposes of giving you the full rundown, is going to be a single node system, so a single piece of hardware, or it could be a component of 3+ nodes tied together to bring our HA, high availability model, to the table for that self-healing methodology that makes us so incredibly efficient as well. Now, when you do have the cluster spun up, you can dig in and see what's happening. As I said, from a health perspective, it gives you an idea of any warnings that are happening. And this is done in real time. The clusters are actually sending the data up to Fleet Manager, and it's giving you that single pane of glass view here. But we can click in and take another look and go in and see what's happening at the virtual machine and at the cluster level from this view as well. So in this case, we're looking at a bunch of clusters that are living in our organization, giving you an idea of what's running on them from a VM perspective, how many are running, out of how many are provisioned. And this is going to be the cluster-wide resource utilization across the board. Now, one thing you'll notice here on this first line is pretty cool as well, and I'll speak to this real quick. Updates. In the world of scale computing, because of our high availability model that we'll talk about here in a moment more in depth, you have the ability to take updates from an infrastructure standpoint. Now, this is virtual infrastructure that's going to leverage, of course, any updates to the scale computing hypercore portion of it. Scribe, which is our scale computing reliable independent block engine. And that's the piece that lets us get really efficient from a resource perspective, because we're not bringing a VSA to the table, as opposed to other methodologies out there that do that and need a lot of resources just to turn those lights on. So that gives us a lot of flexibility to fit on those smaller pieces of the puzzle, but also bring live migration to the table in the clustered environment to help us move things out of the way and apply updates without any maintenance windows. And that can be triggered from right here in this cloud component if I wanted to do so. And when we trigger that update, I'll jump into a cluster here and give you a view of what that looks like from a standpoint of moving into a cluster. You actually get into the local UI, and you can see from a standpoint of what you saw in that Fleet Manager view, the detailed local view of not just what's happening across the individual nodes of the cluster. So this would be a 3-node system, 1, 2, and 3. You'll notice they have their own IP addresses. And this is very unique as well, meaning I don't have to have a management console or a separate third baseman type setup in place to manage my workloads or to manage my infrastructure. I can log into any of these local IP addresses, and that gives me access into the entire cluster to do the review of what's happening, to spin up new workloads, to load ISOs, to do what I need to from a day-to-day basis to manage the cluster. And this is that visibility here at the local standpoint. And you can see here I'm running 30 VMs provisioned, 9 of them turned on at this point. And those can also be looked at down here below as we search through these VM cards. You'll notice some are grayed out. Those are the placeholders or the turned off VMs. And then the white ones here are going to be the powered on versions that give us that ability to see what's happening again across the board. We do have filtering capabilities that allow us to tie in and find filters and see our workloads if we have them specifically segregated, or maybe it's a back office application versus a warehousing application versus a POS application. Whatever you want to do here is a piece of the puzzle that lets you label, if you will, and search and filter, but not just search and filter. You have abilities to do at mass operations like power on, power off, take snapshots, which is our part of our data protection suite, take clones, again, a sandbox or a dev environment activity, if you will. And then, of course, the one we don't want to really do is delete, but you could at mass if you wanted to in that capacity. Now, the filter also gives us the ability across the top here just to take some mass operations in general. We can collapse things, we can expand things, we can change the view at the VM card level. Here, if we want to, by looking at the general dashboard itself, we can go into the actual devices that are within each virtual machine here and take a look at the ISOs that are installed on the virtual CD-ROM drives or the virtual disks themselves and associated thin provision storage that we leverage. So when we create VMs here for the first time, just to kind of go back to the start of this, we have the ability to give things names, tell us what they're about, and really fill in a few blanks very quickly and very easily to spin up these workloads. So if I kind of create this one off something I've already had in here, We'll call this an application that is maybe just a test dev app. And we're going to tag this in my tag as well here. Operating systems can be what I said earlier, x86 based. We do have provisions in here to align for the newer operating systems, including uses for the VTPM for some of the encryption needs with Microsoft and Linux and that conversation. But at the end of the day, this is about getting a virtual machine stood up with resources that you want applied. Now, the CPU and RAM in this case is going to be stitched together and automatically presented in this interface. And what we're going to see here is the logical settings from a standpoint of what our virtual cores could be assigned as. So we select how many virtual cores we want assigned to a VM. And then from that point forward, we're able to take the RAM and assign that manually to where we think that needs to land. And I'm going to take that and put 8 gigs of RAM in here in this particular one. And then take a look at the storage. Storage on us is then provisioned, as I said. We take all of the drives within the physical hardware itself in this hyperconverged setup, stitch those together through a backplane. That backplane then combines everything when we create the cluster and automatically stands it up and presents us basically with the idea to say, okay, how much thin provision space do I want to create per virtual disk? I carve that out. I could add a second drive here if I wanted to. Say maybe I'm going to partition out some things within the guest OS for databases or file storage separately in that conversation. Up to you how you want to do it. You thin provision it. And keep in mind, this thin provision can be leveraged for what you need now and grow later, because we do have the ability to go into the guest operating system along with the operating system here at HyperCore to expand that storage on the fly. So all this stuff can happen very quickly and very easily. You tell it what you want, and then literally we're going to pick from an ISO. These ISOs, as I'll show you here in a second, are built within and held within, I should say, our media repository. You're responsible for uploading the ISOs you want to use. And we can also take it a step further as we get booted up into a VM and actually load virtual disks directly into the system as a part of our migration tool that we'll talk about. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and put a 2019 ISO on it, and I'm going to hit create. Now, while that's happening, it's going to happen very quickly, so much so that when I create the filter here, you'll see this tester1 virtual machine card is already in place. So standing up that first virtual machine from scratch, very quick, very easy to happen. I can turn it on, and when I turn it on, it's going to automatically provision where it needs to be from a perspective of those resources across the cluster at the time of me pushing that power button. And you'll see here probably across the top here on this first node, I'm going to guess we'll see another sliver here that expands up, and just that quickly you'll notice if I click these arrows here, you can kind of see I got put onto this first node. I didn't do anything except turn it on and put the resources I wanted inside of that. And we can take it a step further, and we can actually go in here and go into the console of that VM. And there is the beautiful, wonderful world of Windows that's starting for the very first time. Now, I won't sit here and make you watch the paint dry, shall we say, virtually, but we'll go back into the cluster view itself. And now that this guy is up and running, we would provision Windows. We would do what we want from that perspective to get it up and running. Now, let's backwards a little bit, take a step back. If you already have workloads coming in, that's the migration piece we want to talk to a little bit here. Now, there's a couple ways that can get done from a standpoint of getting workloads on. We do have an import utility right here that we can click on and actually leverage the VMDKs or foreign disks, if you will, to be imported directly into Scale by simply doing a quick template export import process on our platform. And this will convert it. Now, there's downtime associated with it, but we do that on a daily basis and can handle that on the regular, no problem. Within that same concept, as I talked about, one new feature we've added here in the past year or so is the ability to go into our media repository and go in and actually upload our virtual disks. So in this case, because I'm logged in via Secure Link, it does give me a note, and this is actually a great point to hit on that for a moment. Our Secure Link process is that VPN. So I am not on a VPN right now. We're using a VPN-less connectivity to get into my data center and actually connect into this running cluster. When I am in that mode, it's going to notify me, so it doesn't give me any latency issues when I do want to upload things in that capacity. But when you're in locally onto the cluster, you do have the ability to go in and upload virtual disks directly from your local storage or local storage shares that are in that environment. And as you can see, VMDKs, VHDs, those things are easily imported. And then I can go into an existing virtual machine once that's imported. And if I want to modify the boot order or add a disk from that proprietary area, I can go to the uploaded disk area and grab that VMDK and that VHD file and attach it. So now I can migrate those in directly, spin them up, turn them on. That's a process that's built in as a part of our components to help with that migration process as well. Another one that we have brought to the table here recently is one that is encompassed with our integration from a backup perspective with Acronis. Now, Acronis in their Cyber Protect platforms has this new feature called Convert to VM. In this case, we're able to take a backup file. So the Acronis TibX file that is integrated, by the way, to the Scale Computing platform. We put a helper VM, a lightweight VM, into the cluster, into the target system where this backup would be instantiated or stood up at the end of the day. And then in here, after we have the initial backup job already set up, we set up a secondary job that says convert to VM. Now, this is the cool part because this could be a migration tool. This could be a DR tool. You have flexibility with this tool and it goes in any direction because what we are able to do is leverage the integration we have against other integrations to bring that backup file, take it out, reach out to the most recent copy, and then we stand it up. And when we stand it up, it's pretty cool to see because I can come back in here to Fleet Manager, for instance, and show you that I actually have a running instance of that happening on a daily basis into my personal cluster, which is the tiny stuff I talked about earlier. So if I log in here, and this is what it looks like to leverage our secure link technology, I click in from the outside world and I go into my cluster. And right here at the top, you'll happen to see that converted job I just talked about happening automatically under the covers. So I have an ESXi instance running. I have a Windows 10 VM on there backed up by Acronis. And then it's going into the Acronis cloud, reaching into that backup file. And then every night, what it's doing right now, if I look at my snapshot schedule, which we'll talk about here a little more in depth as well, you can see that I'm actually getting it in the morning, the most recent snapshot, and it's applying that to that warm virtual machine state. So if I want to recover or migrate from that VM when I have that final integration, if you will, completed from a standpoint of the migration piece, I can then now take that backup file. I can go to those snapshots. I can say, give me a copy of this particular VM, and I can clone it and say, I'm going to do clone test for a dev environment in this case. And when I hit clone, what you'll see here is how quickly we can recover from that snapshot state as well. And this is a great piece to think about from a malware or a disaster perspective, not only from the migration standpoint, but the cloning and snapshot pieces we'll dive into here in a second give you that ability to quickly fail back or fail over in the bad times that might happen out there. But when I clone that VM out that says clone test, then I can just spin that guy up and turn it on. And now I am actually migrated from that ESXi environment onto HyperCore. And then going forward, here's the fun part. I can actually protect this stuff natively on my cluster. Acronis can stay and do its job into the cloud, continue to send those backups up to the cloud. But now I have the ability to go into a virtual machine and say, you know what, I want to protect this. Now, protection for us that's built in part of the data protection suite is based on snapshots. Consider that a foundational backup because we do have the ability to completely restore an entire VM, or I can reach within a VM and go to a snapshot. And within that snapshot, if I have multiple virtual disks, they would be exposed. And I can actually mount those virtual disks in a capacity to another VM or the same VM and grab files and folders and move them around. So it's a very fully featured baseline backup foundation, if you will, built on snapshots and leveraging our replication as well from a DR perspective. Because if I switch back over to my lab environment and go to this Maverick cluster, what you'll see here is if I go into our control center, there's a section that allows us to expand on the data protection suite from a snapshot perspective. Snapshots are available for us to take anytime we want by clicking on that little camera icon you saw there in the UI, or we can go a step further and schedule these. Now, these schedules are pretty cool because we can set those schedules to be on a daily, hourly, minute, month, week, whatever we want from a standpoint of how often we want to take those. And then we can add to that as well from an automation and a ease of use standpoint by putting recurrences on that as well as retention. Now, when we bring scaled computing to the table on two sides of the equation from a data protection and DR standpoint, we can introduce another set of gear. That could be a single node, that could be a matching cluster that we could cross-replicate workloads between, because this now gives us the ability to set retention periods, and not just locally, but on both sides of the equation. And those can be different on both sides of that equation, as you can see from here. The cool part is once that schedule is in place, we can go back into the virtual machine view itself. In that tester VM we set up, for instance, I'm going to go into the snapshots tab. There's that snapshot manual icon I talked about. So to take a manual snapshot, I just give it a name, hit snapshot, and it's going to take that automatically and prepare that. Now, if I want to schedule that, that's where I jump in here and I pick my schedule and I apply that one. Or if I don't want to apply one and I'm okay with the defaults for what we're going to do next, which is the replication piece, I can just leave that blank and let the replication take that advantage of that 15-minute window that is built in by default. And what that looks like for us is the ability to select a target of another scaled computing system to send those snapshots to. So not only would I have them living here in the event I need to use my cloning mechanism to restore, but now I can go into the replication window. I can select another set of systems or system, depending on what we have set up. I'm going to select Goose here just to stay with the Top Gun theme that we've already pronounced here. And when I do that and I hit replicate, what you'll see here in the background, or here at the bottom, I should say, is that actual process happening in terms of setup behind the scenes. So it's going to sit here and be idle until it figures out, okay, I got a couple snapshots I want to move. But what's going to happen on the other end, if I go in and show you now that Goose cluster, it is a single node as opposed to a clustered scenario. So even another view here, just one node, one box with 4 disks in it. But we stand that up as the target. If I put my filter on here, where we put that tester 1 VM, you'll notice it's already known about it. It's already been told, hey, I'm going to send you this stuff. I'm going to send you these snapshots. Will you receive them, please? And as that process starts, which is in the background, it's already started. You can see here, it's going to throw those snapshots that exist. And then going forward on the schedule, it's going to take it locally first. It is going to dedupe and compress that, by the way, to help with the storage methodologies under the covers to be efficient in that worm as well. And then it's going to basically continue to do that until such time as you need to use it. And as you saw from the standpoint of getting the Acronis VM stood up and cloned out, the same process exists here. So if something bad were to happen, here's some snapshots that already exist on this test box here, for instance. I can clone any snapshot I want by going in and clicking that clone button we talked about earlier, or I can expand that and then mount that virtual disk to grab those files and folders in that capacity. Or as you said, if we not to recover from that DR nastiness that needs to happen because of a malware infection or something, we are available to do this in seconds. We don't have to create time frames or maintenance windows to get that done. We can actually do it in seconds because it's 15 seconds or so to actually spin up that clone VM from a standpoint of that snapshot. And when that's in place and running, you're back here. You have the ability, as you can see here, to see what's happening from that transmission standpoint as well in the grand scheme of how we do that replication and restore. So all this happens automatically. Now, another cool piece that happens in the grand scheme of scale computing is the ability to recover. If something is to go wrong, it's usually going to be a drive. It's usually going to be a power supply. It's going to be something that we can't predict because hardware is hardware. Now, at the end of the day, if that happens, AIM that I talked about earlier, in our AI ops model, AIM is Autonomous Infrastructure Management Engine. It is state machine technology. It's watching conditions. It's seeing what happens behind the scenes, and it's reacting to those conditions to put us in a better place for things that happen, to put us in a better place when things happen, I should say. And when those things happen, the system reacts. So in the world of scale computing, how we live there, we're in an N+1 redundancy factor. So if something goes wrong, we have the ability to absorb a failure based on the storage and the resources available. And across the top, this gauge is important for us to take a look and see if we're in the good graces with that HA model. And here, as you can see, green is a good color. That means go, we're good. HA is intact. Now, really across the board, the CPU and the RAM is our important conversation here with HA because our storage, when we stitch that storage together, we're taking all of the disks across all of the chassis, and we're applying a wide stripe and mirror at a software layer, very similar to a RAID 10 from that standpoint. So it adds to our data protection suite with that wide stripe and mirror now because we're putting blocks of data across different drives on different chassis to give us that immediate recoverability if something goes wrong. Now, those things that can go wrong could be a single drive failure here on one node or in 2 drives on different nodes. Up to 4 drives across this entire chassis can fail on different nodes, and we have no data loss. We have no issues whatsoever. Now, worst case scenario, one of these boxes just goes dark. Maybe someone tripped over a power plug or something accidental happened. It doesn't really matter why, but something happened. Well, when that happens, the system, our backplane technology that allows the nodes to talk to each other, automatically watching what happens, knows that that box is offline. And it's going to wait for a little bit before it says, all right, are you sure you're not coming back? And if it doesn't find that guy coming back to life, it's going to actually take virtual machines and it's going to move them. And it's going to move them to a sense, and I'll show you a demonstration of here how it moves, because I can actually live migrate workloads by simply clicking on these arrows and selecting another host. And it will actually move that in real time without any disruption to the end user. So this is how the update process works. This is what happens under the covers now. If there's a failure of a physical device, obviously it can't move it live because it's not live anymore. But that same process of triggering the virtual machine to start elsewhere is triggered automatically by AIM. And that happens within about 90 seconds. So imagine a world, if you will, where something went wrong, this box dies. You get notified that box dies by our setup within the application and within our control center by email. Or if you're on the cluster, you see an alert, or in Fleet Manager, you see an alert. By the time you get in there, the system's already bringing those workloads back to another node and turning them on for you. So now your downtime is minimized to the very, very minimal least level, and giving you the ability to just say, okay, we're back up and running. Let me call Scale and figure out what happened with that node. And if you can get on the phone with us, we can actually be extra hands for you as well. Because within Scale Computing's setup, you have in the control center, there is also a remote support option. Now, remote support is at your beck and call with the best ever support that we have in the industry from an IT perspective. Now, granted, I was a customer, so I do have a little bit of the Scale hat on when I say that. But now being on this side of the coin and experiencing it and talking to customers and seeing the feedback, it is a true statement. We have best of breed support from our awesome team based in Indianapolis, Indiana. Now, when they do have something to help you with, or when you need help, you would call in, or you could do a support chat and get assistance that way, or email. And when you do get on the phone or connected with somebody, you'll see there's these codes that we can input here. That's going to open up an SSL tunnel for our support team to give you a hand. Now, they could give you a hand simply by designating, you're right, that hard drive failed, or that power supply failed, or something to that effect. Or if it's something else, you want a health check. If you don't want to do your own updates, that easy button that we actually start the process and move the workloads out of the way, update, move the workloads out of the way, update. That is an automated and rolling process. If you don't want to push that easy button, you can let our support team push that easy button for you, and they will apply your updates and do that remotely at your beck and call if necessary. At the end of the day, the support team is going to be that extension for you. They're going to help you figure out what's going wrong quickly and easily, fix that issue. And in the event they determine that it is a hardware component that failed, that would be a power supply, or that would be a hard drive, or the entire chassis. We're not going to break open chassis. We're not going to make you break open chassis. We're going to actually give you the ability to just simply say, okay, self-replacement, cool. I'm going to get the next business day shipment for those components that we deemed failed. You swap it out, you're back whole again. And when that node comes back to life in that failure event, everything is going to move back over to where it remembered being the last time, because there's affinity tied to those virtual machines as well when we spin them up. So at the end of the day, you're putting yourself into an infrastructure that is self-healing, that is efficient, that is simple, and that is very flexible for the workloads and the time frames of day-to-day operations inside of the Scale Computing infrastructure. Now, another piece I'll talk to here real quick back at Fleet Manager is kind of going back to day one. If you don't want to go and actually physically be on site, or can't physically be on site because of geographic or travel issues to that point, as long as there's somebody that could literally just plug in a couple cables and you have DHCP available at the other site, we introduce zero-touch provisioning as a part of our Fleet Manager product. Now, zero-touch provisioning is powerful. It gives you exactly what the acronym stands for, ZTP, zero-touch provisioning. When you go into the cluster view, you can see up here on the right, I can add a cluster. This is where it starts. You can actually start the naming convention of what that cluster is going to be called, where it might live with some net mask and information related to the subnet itself. And then when you order nodes from Scale Computing, you actually have those nodes here already uploaded into Fleet Manager under your instance from a standpoint of your organization being a part of Fleet Manager. We add the nodes that we know are shipping to a specific location. And when we do that, I can actually go back into the interface and now put the location specific information that I want to be spun up and automatically configured. And the fun part here is when we do that, what we're actually going to have the ability to do is that information gets staged and waits for someone to do that work I talked about. So your dangerous locations managers, whatever you want to call them from a standpoint of additional IT hands at locations you can't get to quickly and easily, they can plug that in. And when they do, the system gets DHCP. It reaches out to fleet.scalecomputing.com, pulls down the information related that was typed into those configuration boxes. And within 15 minutes or less, we're standing up the cluster to the point of where you saw us putting a brand new VM on, migrating in, uploading ISOs, doing the things that you would normally do from that standpoint. And with the power of what I showed you in the terms of the fleet manager's automatic VPN-like technology with SecureLink, I can then again go into the cluster by simply clicking on it, going into the cluster view here, or another cool view to look at is your entire organization's virtual machines once it's all in Fleet Manager. You can actually go in and you'll see a whole bunch of VMs on. I can go in at that point and then console directly to the VM without jumping in to the actual UI console to do more work on the virtual machines as well. Now, all these components of Fleet Manager, along with the visibility of what's happening, and as you may have seen here with the quick view within one of the clusters themselves, the metrics we have gives you that single pane of glass, gives you that A to Z experience from a lifecycle and transitional standpoint, along with our support models that give you the ability to do everything from a day one, a methodology through the life cycle in one pane of glass. Now, this will set it and forget it from a running standpoint, because once you stand scale up, because of the AI technology, your world is immediately better. The HA model kicks in if you have DR included, or if you're running the backup considerations we have. We can do any agent-based backup on top of Scale Computing's infrastructure for that point as well. I hit on Acronis specifically because we do have an integration there, and especially with the migration methodologies it provides to us, we can leverage that in our portfolio as well. Now back to the conversation of where we kind of stand through from a transition within the slides themselves here. If I come back and just bring you back full circle and kind of, if you will, kind of total this conversation up a little bit. If you think about where the world has come from a long time ago when hyperconverged was really coming into infancy before it was really introduced, there was cloud computing. Right. So this is a nice slide from 2010 that our CEO provided here recently that I think is very cool to kind of give you an idea of where we've been, where we're at, and where we're going. You notice there's no big names on this slide. And that's obviously because this is just data centers. That's what the cloud was when it was built, right? You're putting things into a data center because it's the cloud, and that's what people thought they should do. And then we transitioned into cloud providers, because they saw an opportunity to actually take workloads, to take applications, to take deployment and those types of activities and put them into an existence that makes it simpler and makes it more efficient. And that's an ironic statement for me to say, because that's exactly the terminology and the methodology we use to describe Scale Computing Edge Fleet Manager and the components there within of our Scale Computing platform, because we bring that same methodology of that cloud-like experience into what we now see as edge computing, either at the bleeding edge where workloads need to live and breathe with the high availability I demonstrated, or all the way back into the data center where the same footprint can be expounded into larger, more denser options, but our software doesn't change. Same methodologies to run it, same methodologies to control it. But as you can see here, over time, we've had that ebb and flow of centralized and distributed and centralized and distributed, and we're back in that distributed model again. The edge computing, AI at the edge, surveillance, all of those different opportunities have led to the boom of edge computing. And now with this disruption, if you will, in the market that we service in hyperconvergence with VMware and Broadcom coming to the table and joining forces, we now have the ability to leverage that distributed methodology with Scale Computing, the components there within Fleet Manager and everything else, and start to transition that. Now, how do you guys get there? Well, I demonstrated a little bit on how easy it is to get stood up, how easy it is to use, but the migration options we have, not just the ones I talked about with the Acronis piece, but the automatic migration template, if you will, that's built in where we can do the manual import and export. There's products out there that we also leverage, one specifically being by formerly Carbonite, now OpenText. We call Move is a synchronization tool that helps us take existing workloads, bring them over and get them on. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to simplify. We're trying to take a lot of the bells and whistles and knob turning that's necessary to get you the features you want as the bells and whistles without the configuration, without the additional methodologies, without the chaos that it takes to stand those up and make them work. So with those methodologies of getting migrated, we can get you onboarded up and running in hours, not weeks, not months, hours, days, those types of conversations. And if you don't want to do hands-on yourself, we have a services team. They can handle all of those things for you as well. The migration piece I talked about with Acronis is one of the very cool tools we have out there. And I've summarized with this slide right here because that's kind of where we're coming back to full circle on what we bring to the table with scale computing. Coming from a VMware environment, landing on scale computing is very quick. It is very easy. It is very transparent. We can help get you to that point very quickly and very easily with our migration methodologies, as well as getting onboarded in general with the campaigns we have to help you do the seamless switch or a rip and replace to get you where you need to be. Because at the end of the day, with scale computing, that's what we bring to the table. Simplicity, efficiency, availability, and flexibility with the best ever support models under the covers. Again, I was a customer. I speak to the experience. I lived it. I breathed it. I loved it so much. I get to talk to you, luckily, about that today. And I am truly happy and pleasured to be able to talk to you about that today. Now, with that being said, Doug, I think, like you said, we can switch it to a little Q&A. That's kind of what I wanted to go through today. And I appreciate you giving me this time.
Yeah, no, that was great. And obviously, we would encourage everybody to head to scalecomputing.com. There is just it's a great looking website, but there's a whole host of content available, including, as you see on the right there with the two arrows, some pricing and a link to a demo. And there's pop-ups that come in that will allow you to connect with sales and support. And so there's any number of ways to start to understand how this works in your particular instance. But Mike, I want to talk to you for a moment about, with the perspective of being the client and considering this migration. So before we get to the hows, let's talk about the whys. So what is driving a migration at this point? And to take that even further, what should the folks who are considering entering into the process, what should they be preparing for? What are some of the fundamental steps that they need to take to get ready for such a migration?
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the end of the day, what's driving these is a couple factors. One, it's timing. When VMware introduced their new pricing models, a lot of people got hit really hard with, I've seen 70x, 100 plus X, some crazy numbers that have introduced a little bit of visceral reactions, if you will, in the market where people are just like, okay, there's no way I'm going to pay that. This can't be real. So they sit and they wait, and some were lucky enough to take advantage of the pre-migrate or the pricing they received prior to the Broadcom acquisition of VMware and extend that in. But it also creates a perfect storm because sometimes the hardware and the life cycle of that hardware doesn't align with the software side of it with VMware. So that kind of the things you look for there are exactly that timing. And that's, again, why I have those campaigns we talked about with the seamless switch. So if you happen to have an upgrade that's coming in place and it's sitting in front of you and it's really, really, really crazy numbers compared to what you paid in the past, but you just bought new hardware, okay, let's look at what we can do there, because the hardware itself is the hardware. Now, granted, with the AI model that you saw me demonstrate and how scale computing has the under the cover hood autonomous infrastructure that takes advantage of the ability to be AI under the covers, we want to make sure that stays really core to the product and how we can keep things automated and keep things running. So the HCL, we're working to make that easier to absorb into those conversations where people are hitting the step where, okay, my hardware is coming up, but my VMware is needed now. How do we bridge that gap? Well, we come in and we talk about those capabilities, whether it be switching to newer hardware that's actually going to be better performing anyway, and bringing that from a trade-in perspective, or a rip and replace where we give you valuation to those hardware pieces. The actual software itself can be put onto existing hardware that matches the HCLs, and we can help align those pieces of the puzzle, as I said, as we figure out if that's a good match or not. Because at the end of the day, that the ability to get people onboarded onto scale computing is going to do a couple things for them. One, it's going to simplify their lives and infrastructure. Now let's put brass tacks to it and understand that it is a change. Change is never easy in any IT environment. It just isn't. Change in general is never easy for most folks. But in the world of infrastructure, in the world of what you've been doing for X amount of years, putting a change in place seems very scary. So one, you have to prepare yourself for a change. But be open-minded to the change. Understand that you're putting things in place because you've been doing things a long time and looking at options that can actually make your life easier and give efficiency and value to not just you and your organization, but everybody that supports it. Your workloads are considerations. Would they run faster? Would they run better on newer, better equipment? Probably so. Can we deploy it faster and get it in the hands of the users faster? Yes. Can we recover faster and get it back into the hands of the users if something goes wrong? Yes. Can we be a better value at the end of the day from a TCO standpoint when you're comparing to what virtualization costs are today on the new world of VMware compared to what scale has been and continues to bring to the table now and in the future? Yes. So the considerations are endless, really, in the minds of the IT generalists and the IT directors and those that lead it. But at the end of the day, you're bringing to the table that efficiency and that flexibility model to the end users and the partners to bring them to the table and get them based onto a scale computing methodology for now and into the future.
Yeah. So if it were you and you were going to do it, I mean, talk a little bit about how you do it. I mean, do you?
Yeah.
I mean, rip and replace is
Scary thing.
It sounds scary.
Yeah.
Though it's not quite the same as it used to be, but
yeah,
the same concepts, right? So what would you do? I mean, are you talking about maybe taking a few instances? Are you talking about, I mean, how do you think about,
Yeah. Do you baby step it? Do you eat the elephant?
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
walk through how you'd think about it on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you gotta take into consideration the organization and what's running and what's important, right? So in most cases, we're gonna run before, or we're gonna crawl before we can walk, which before we can run, right? So I probably take the walking approach to start, not necessarily crawl, because again, I'm experienced with what the capabilities of the scale computing platform are. So I'm gonna walk right in the door. I'm gonna identify some secondary workloads or applications, virtual machines, physical machines, whichever side of the equation they live on today, that can be moved over as my test bed. And I'm going to get those over to the door, and I'm going to maybe leverage Acronis in the backup model to give me the quick migration capabilities and get it pushed over, cut it off, turn it on, let it run, feel it out, make sure it's what I want. Because at that point, from the standpoint of getting it stood up and testing it the first time, to being able to rinse and repeat that model becomes very easy in the day of the life after the first few are done, because then we can introduce automation. One thing I didn't mention a lot of, but we do have the ability to do is leverage automation scripts and playbooks that are already built, from spinning up new workloads or to migrating and cloning and spinning up existing workloads through our Ansible Galaxy collection that is already out there in the world. So if you go to Ansible Galaxy and look up scale computing, you will see an entire playbook built with those automations that we can bring to the table to help align. After we get those first few walk-in, we can run with those automations. So you have some different models there that can get you in the door. But I think the first thing is literally, if you want to crawl, let's crawl. Let's get one in the door and let's move it and show you how quick and easy it is and stand it up. Because once we do so, it's going to be a road to success from that day forward.
And is that your experience, back to the solution side, is that your experience as folks are coming through to scale computing, that they begin with that kind of walk path or just get something to stand up, and then it's pretty evident from there, and they're like, okay, let's start running as fast as we can?
Yeah, most experiences we have, people start slow just because of that change factor and that fear factor, if you will. But there is an easy methodology they'll see very quickly and easily, and then they'll start running pretty quick. And that's evident as well from a standpoint of what you saw me do on the demo. One thing I do when I'm actually live with customers and partners on demos is like, congratulations, you're scale certified. Just rinse and repeat what you saw me do. Because literally that's what we're doing in these instances. We're setting something up that's easy for the admins and those people that have to manage these systems, especially if they're coming from those, complexities with VMware. It simplifies that process, but changing that mindset to be able to say, all right, I'm going to get this running and I'm going to look at it and I'm going to make sure it's perfect. Once they see how quick and easy it is to get it to that level, then that running starts and they really start flipping the switch on their own. And usually before we even tell them to, it's like, oh, actually, no, I did a few more last weekend. We're good. I'm actually on a good path.
So I know you shared some Gartner slides at Solutions Review. We cover a lot of solution providers, and there are more arriving every day. I mean, clearly the world is shifting, and there's a lot of pressure, and quite frankly, a flood of data, and really, it can be confusing. So what is it, kind of cut through the clutter, if you will, for folks that are seeing a lot of other solution providers out there. How does Scale create their unique selling proposition?
Yeah, it really comes back to those pillars I talked about getting. One, longevity. I mean, if you look at the history of scale computing, in the grand scheme of virtualization, hyperconvergence, it's been around over 10 years. And that's a unicorn in this industry. Obviously, VMware has been around a very long time. There's the other competitors out there that have been doing it in a similar capacity as well, that have stood the test of time. We've stood the test of time, and during that time, we continue to innovate. And I think that's really what sets us apart is the innovation we're putting in place and have put in place up to date, but behind the scenes, continuing that vision, listening to our customers, listening to this current environment we live in, and adjusting on the fly to those needs to make this product even more substantially ready for the changes that are going to continue to come through the pipe. Because it's not just now, but it's the future we try to think about. And as you saw on that one slide that I gave you, kind of the evolution from a distributed back to an on-prem to a distributed model, that method of thought is what's put into the scale computing platform every day. So where are we going? How can we get there? And what can we take that we've learned from in the past to make it simpler, to make it easier, to make it affordable, which are all the things we already do, and do it in best of breed with our support that is best of breed, and push all of that envelope a little higher and a little better to bring more to the table and let them take advantage of what scale computing has to offer.
Well, this has been outstanding. I think, again, we would encourage everybody to go to scalecomputing.com and check out everything that is being offered, all the resources, the support, the ecosystem, and certainly you can see a lot of examples by industry depending upon what vertical you might be in and how you're considering it. Scale does have a pretty comprehensive breadth of experience across industries, so there's usually some examples that you can certainly relate to. Mike, any last advice that you would offer to anybody as they're thinking about taking that next step and starting to consider this move?
Be ready for a change and accept it, and take that change as an opportunity to expand your boundaries in the world of infrastructure, because a change is coming, and it's coming quick. And to be a part of it, you need a platform that can help support you now and into that future. And I think with what we have brought to the table here with the Broadcom situation and VMware, we can help people get there, and we can help them quickly attain the same stability and the same future-proof capabilities that they're looking for. Yeah,
there's never been a more interesting time to be in the world of enterprise technology and dealing with all that's coming. I mean, the technology is just moving so fast, and the demand is ever increasing. So outstanding presentation today. Best of luck for the rest of the year, and we'll look forward to talking to you again down the road.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate the time.
So there you have it, another solution in our spotlight. We want to thank Mike O'Neill and Scale Computing for that presentation, and we appreciate your attendance as well. Until next time, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review. Thanks for watching.